Hey, this is Drew Page. Welcome to the Drew Page channel. In this video, I'm going to address a question that someone asked me by text message saying, can I really get sued for getting an oil change? Because they were notified by a news story that they sent to me that someone in Michigan was being sued because of injuries that resulted from the owner giving the car to a dealership so that they can get an oil change. So if you find this video helpful, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and hit the notification bell. Thanks again so much for all of you who have subscribed to the channel. Hope you're enjoying the content. If there are any particular stories, things you'd like me to evaluate, please feel free to put those in the comments. I try to check as many of those as I can and want to give you the best value and best content that I can. So with that being said, let's get into the video. So in Michigan, on May 4th, a news story broke out that a person who brought a Jeep into a Jeep dealership was being sued. And it was the owner of the vehicle. And the owner of the vehicle was being sued not because the owner had done anything wrong, but simply because he had given his vehicle to a dealership to get a simple oil change. But what happened is that one of the employees was apparently, according to the news story, an unlicensed technician, and was operating the vehicle, and apparently it wasn't an automatic transmission. It was a stick, and it had a clutch and all these things. And this 19-year-old unlicensed, uncertified employee released the clutch, and the car kicked forward off of the lift and apparently fell on top of one of the other employees who was killed as a result of that employee's improper operation of the vehicle. And so the person died, and the family is retaining an attorney to bring a wrongful death suit, which is the normal course. But what's not normal about this case is because the person was killed at work and it was related to work, like most states, there is a workers' compensation statute. And if there's a workers' compensation statute, generally that is the exclusive remedy when you're trying to go against your employer. So they can't sue the dealership because the dealer was their employer and it was an injury that was involved in the scope of the employment. So they can't sue them to get the insurance and get the big money that they're looking to get. So they are now suing the owner. Now the owner, all the owner did is give the car to the dealership. So should the owner be responsible for the negligence of a 19-year-old unlicensed employee? Well, I'm not a Michigan lawyer, but it looks like there may be some potential issues there in Michigan. There's a Michigan liability statute that gives basically owner liability for the permissive wrongful acts of someone that they give the vehicle to. So there's owner liability, and then there's a separate issue of negligent entrustment. Now, negligent entrustment in most states, including mine, requires you to know or have reason to know that the person you're entrusting the vehicle to would operate it in negligence, or it was a strong likelihood that they would have engaged in negligence, and that negligent entrustment caused or contributed to the accident. So that's kind of how it works in most states. But here, the owner certainly would not have known or even had reason to know that this dealership was employing unlicensed people or people who didn't know how to operate vehicles, unless they had given him some sort of notice. They said, hey, by the way, we're going to have somebody working on this that's never worked on this type of car before. And if he had that kind of information and said, oh, well, don't worry about it, go ahead. Now we may have a potential issue of negligent entrustment. But without any information that he knew or had reason to know that the dealership was going to engage in some sort of negligent action and that their negligence would then result in injury, there wouldn't be a case for negligent entrustment. So essentially, they're falling on this owner liability. Now, there's a couple things here that obviously the defendant, the owner of the vehicle's attorney, is likely going to deal with. Number one, Michigan is a comparative negligence state. Now, Virginia is a contributory negligent state. What that means is if you're a contributory negligent state, if the plaintiff is even 1% at fault, then the person cannot recover. The plaintiff can't recover. There's one exception, but it's very rarely met. But I may take that at another time. But at any rate, contributory negligence is basically an all or nothing. If the plaintiff was in any way negligent, you can't recover. In a comparative negligent state, the jury gets to apportion out percentages of fault. So let's say that a person is driving and they're speeding, and the defendant is driving and they're speeding, and they collide. The jury can say, well, the plaintiff was 40% at fault and the defendant was 60%, or they could say 50-50 and basically deal with it that way. They can put percentages on it. So I would suspect that if this does proceed to a jury, then the jury would be able to hear this evidence. And I would be shocked to hear that the jury would give any percentage of liability to the owner of the vehicle, because all he did was take it into an oil change. If that in and of itself is liability, then all of us who go to Michigan, at least under that law, if we were to happen to get an oil change, would be setting ourselves up to be sued and be responsible for negligence. I doubt most reasonable jurors are going to hold a person to any percentage of liability. I mean, I guess if they have to put some number on it, maybe 1%. Of course, 1% of $15 million, which is what they're suing for, is a lot of money. But that's where we're at in comparative negligence. And I suspect that the defense would be arguing that if it goes to a jury. The other thing is that the owner of the vehicle can then sue and bring in the dealership, because the owner of the vehicle is not in an employee-employee relationship, can sue to bring them in as a third party as an indemnitor. So you've probably seen in some contracts that someone has to indemnify if they get sued. What that means is that if the owner of the vehicle gets sued and is ordered to pay $15 million, the owner is now pointing to the dealership and say, you're the one that's going to have to pay. So if they get a judgment for me for $15 million, you're going to have to reimburse me back for that, or ultimately you're going to have to be the one to write the check to the plaintiff's people. So at any rate, it still involves a lot of time, a lot of stress, depositions, time off work, and all of these inconveniences just for simply bringing their vehicle to the dealership. Now, I don't know if, and again, I don't know how this is going to play out. I'm not a Michigan lawyer, so I'm not giving Michigan legal advice. If you get in a situation like this, you need to get your own lawyer. But I would be interested to see that if this plays out and this person is ultimately held responsible, I'd be interested to see if the Michigan General Assembly or legislature or whatever they call themselves doesn't change this, because it is simply outrageous that somebody would simply be able to turn in their vehicle to somebody and have no knowledge of the expertise and experience and certifications of what goes on behind a dealership building, that you could be responsible simply because you're getting an oil change. And that's really all that it is. I would suspect that if that is a valid and accurate application of the law in Michigan, I don't believe that we would have that same scenario here in Virginia. The person would simply be limited to their workers' compensation here in Virginia, and unless they could prove negligent entrustment. And if they could prove negligent entrustment, then there would potentially be owner liability there. But that's so hard to prove in a situation like this. So anyway, hope you found this interesting, helpful. Again, my name is Drew Page. I hope you subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit the notification bell, and until next time, stay tuned.